many of you have listened to the Head, Heart, and Boots podcast? I can't tell you that reaction, how much that means to us.
Welcome back to the Head, Heart, and Boots podcast. I'm Chris.
And I'm Brandon. Join us as we wrestle with what it takes to transform ourselves and the businesses we lead. This new camera angle makes my arms look smaller than yours.
I'm noticing that, and I really appreciate it. I thought you did that on purpose.
No, I don't. I didn't, and I am not happy with it.
Oh, man.
Hola.
Yeah.
How are you, amigo?
You know what? We were just talking about some Christmas vacation plans, and I'm getting more and more excited about taking a little break, turning the lights off here for a few days at good old Floodlight Head, Heart, and Boots headquarters here.
This one's actually going to be released while we're on Christmas break.
Yeah. So we've got a good show today. But hey, for those of you that are just now stumbling into Head, Heart, and Boots, and you're like, what is this about? Well, this is kind of the founders podcast for a restoration consulting company. It's called Floodlight Consulting Group. Brandon and I are co-founders of that. And, you know, maybe this is timely too, because it's end of year. A lot of people, whether you're a longtime listener or a first-time listener, you may have been thinking about consulting. Maybe you have friends or other business colleagues that have hired consultants for their business, and it's been a real force multiplier for them. You know, Brandon and I, part of the inspiration for Floodlight was as we were coming up in the restoration industry, we got a lot of value out of hiring consultants and coaches. And so if this is something you've kicked around, you don't maybe have it all figured out, or you're just looking for a battle buddy, somebody to sort of increase your bandwidth to help execute on big plans and objectives for 2025. You know, that's a great way to think about consulting. And if you want to kick the tires on that, just go to floodlightgrp.com. It's pretty obvious where to click through for one-on-one consulting. And I will actually jump on the phone with you and we'll talk shop, get an idea of what you're trying to do, talk about consulting, what it costs. We'll have you take our health and value assessment, which is free, and it's just a great way to get a concrete snapshot of the value of your business today, the condition of your company's health today, and then ultimately be able to chart progress and look back hopefully at the end of 2025 and think, holy cow, boy, did we move the needle. So if that's your goal and you're looking for maybe a partner and want to know what it costs and how that whole thing works, go to floodlightgrp.com. Our clients this year, shoot, man, they're going to do over $250 million in business here in the restoration industry. So
starting to lean closer to the 300 mil.
Tap into the wisdom of the crowd, floodlightgrp.com. And now let's dive in with a great chat with Michelle Blevins, one of our great friends in the industry. We get the
little year in review.
Yeah, we kind of cover the gamut, don't we?
Yeah, we did. It's, you know, this is not going to be industry specific. We actually just talked more at a level of as being business owners and leaders and how that kind of journey mixes in and out with our life. And we did that in the context of 2024. Like for most of you listening, it was a real year, man. There was a lot of things that went down, and it was challenging and both motivating and frustrating and all the stuff.
And sorry in advance for those of you who will be disappointed, but there was actually no F-bombs in this episode.
No, we didn't drop. I got real close, I think, if I recall correctly. It was right there, but we caught it.
What a beautiful picture of self-discipline and control, man. Way to go.
It's all discipline.
So here we are, onward and upward, friends. Enjoy the episode.
What's up, Michelle?
What's up, guys? We're so happy to be here, whether we're emotional or not, whether we have our crap together or not. It's all fine. Everything's fine.
Well,
we were just all into the preamble, and then I'm like, oh, let's just record this, guys. What are we waiting for? Brandon was, for those of you that missed it, which was all of you except for us three, Brandon was just talking about how emotional and personal kind of his orientation is. Like he always wants to make it default. Personal and emotional.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So we were digging.
And then there's Chris on the other side, stoic.
Yeah.
Hard to get through.
Very pragmatic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very grounded.
Yeah. Yeah. Non-emotional.
Where do you fall in the? Where do you fall, Michelle?
I feel like we've already gone off the rails here. So Brandon, when you were talking about before we hit record, how lately that label has kind of been coming around. One, I was surprised, but two, I also went through a phase right around the time that I bought a C&R where I got labeled as emotional a few times. And
Oh,
that honestly took me a little aback, and it really made me evaluate like how I come across in the industry, how I present myself. The times that I got emotional did involve like giving an award to somebody I'm very close to, and I ended up getting a little
yeah.
emotional in the presentation of that.
Hmm.
And then there was in the purchase of C&R some things that happened where I was kind of standing up for myself in that. And in this situation from other parties felt like I was more emotional in that than
Oh, yeah.
I was just really trying to stand up for myself, and I felt like I just no one was hearing me, and that my voice and opinion didn't matter as the person that was buying it, kind of. And so it's interesting when you go through a phase like that where
Yeah.
that was a label that I had gotten in that era, and I was not a fan, and so I really had to evaluate what I was doing that was making me come off that way and try to find
Oh
a
boy.
better way, I suppose.
You just opened Pandora's box.
I
So
did.
I think
Well,
we have a
Right into
direction.
it.
well, you know what comes up for me when you say that is I think unfortunately still a lot of us have a knee-jerk reaction to emotion in the context of business as being weak.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I know that's my fear, and I know like Brandon and I make a joke out of being emotional, or I mean we're kind of talking about it tongue in cheek to a degree, but I think that's what is behind the awkwardness of us talking about being emotional as business people is that I think there's still a perception that we often assign to emotional people that they're somehow weak in a business sense. And sometimes I feel that way. I feel like or I think when I've become emotional in a conversation with a client or in, some kind of media when we're on the podcast, or there's been a couple times where I've gotten emotional on stage when I've been, like I think of a talk that we gave, the heart of the matter that we gave at Core
Mhm.
Yeah.
for the main keynote a couple years ago. It was a very emotional sub. Well, you were in the audience, Michelle.
Yes, and it was excellent. And I remember all the graphics still that Jana had put together and all that. It was excellent. So yes.
Yeah, yeah,
And it
but it
was
was very, it
emotional.
was a very
I
emotional
don't think you
talk.
could have done that without being emotional.
Right, right. But
Unless
of
you're a
course
robot.
the fear behind it, in my the fear in my heart, what was going on in my head was, how are people going to perceive this and perceive me in this light? And we actually both were uh, like we had this internal drive of this is important for us to share, and
Oh,
there's a
hella
part of us too
nervous.
of like, gosh, because it really was the whole talk was really oriented around our inner thought life as leaders and the emotional component of that and where does that come from and how does it affect our leadership and so forth. And so we felt like it was an important topic to lead some conversation in, and yet it was totally absent of any kind of like business strategy per
Yeah.
se.
Mhm.
Like there wasn't
Yeah.
there wasn't some inspiring like 4-step thing of this is how you become a better leader. And so we just thought, God, how is this going to land with people? Are they going to see us as soft? Are they going to somehow see us as, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
It was weird. Here's the thing. I think that when we use the term emotional, I think it's quick to lean into maybe like the teary, I'm
Yeah.
sad or I'm emotional because I'm experiencing something that's moving me in some way. Reality of it is for like me personally, I'm emotional, period. And so what that
Mhm.
means is highs are highs, lows are lows. And so all the things in between are just I can be very animated in those voice tempo, speed of, my, sound of my voice, pitch of my voice, like all those things can go along with it.
Yep.
The other thing is too, is I use the word feel all the time and I don't think about it. And I think this year it's been in kind of stark contrast because with some of our relationships, because we got really intentional this year, for instance, bringing some people into our sphere that are very different from us. And we needed to do that for a number of reasons. But professionally, it brought some people into our sphere that I think, in context to us, are borderline robotic. I mean, they're not, obviously, but
Mm-hmm.
And so, I've had these kind of gut checks several times this year where this person, and I respect and admire the hell out of them. That's the reason they're in our sphere, where they're kind of like, say it like, hey, this is an emotional response to this, or, you're being emotional, or whatever. And at first, when they say that,
Mm.
like part of me gets even more fired up because I kind of,
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Yeah.
working on F-bombs, so I'm not going to color my sentence right now.
That's good.
Um,
Appreciate that.
I have an emotional response to the fact that they're freaking telling me I'm being emotional.
Yep.
So anyways, part of what we were going to do today, this is going to go all over the place. And you know what? I'm really excited about it.
Me too.
We're going to do a little year in review. And we talked about it kind of initially as being a bit of industry specific. You know what, though? I think we're going to throw most of that out. And so if that turns you off and you're listening, just maybe hang in the pocket long enough because you may find it still fairly entertaining and valuable to you. But I don't want to do that. I don't want to talk a whole bunch about the industry, quite honestly.
Same. I'm here for it.
Yeah, my years, I'm getting a little long in the tooth this year. I'm tired.
Mm.
But
Me
I
too.
would like to talk with you guys a little bit, like what in the hell did you experience this year that's maybe different than prior years, and what is it doing? So Michelle, if you're cool with it, we did get a little question in before we started recording. What, like, just give me one right now that's top of mind where you feel like, man, this happened. It's changing the way maybe that I'm responding to certain things or reacting to certain things. What was the lesson? And I think we're gonna just start popping off because I have something burning in my skull right now I want to talk about.
Okay, I love it. So is the overall question, what's something that happened this year that kind of changed my perspective on things,
Yeah.
essentially?
Well, yeah, or
Yeah.
just a real significant shift that's been taking place in you this year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great question. So, I think the biggest shift has been me learning to trust in myself as a business owner, which has been partly overcoming kind of those emotional comments and things that maybe hurt my confidence early on. Um, which I found back really quick to the emotional conversation. What triggers me to be emotional is when I'm frustrated. I become emotional when I'm frustrated.
Yeah.
I'm not a crier. I'm not like, I'm pretty even keeled. I can happy, sad, whatever. But if I'm frustrated, that tends to be when I get more emotional, especially if I feel like I'm not being heard. So this year, people who are listening, if you've heard me on other podcasts this year, you know that it's been an interesting year for my business. I ended up having to let a very close friend go early in the year and her counterpart. And that had been several months in the making. And I really had to learn to trust myself in that. And I really had to learn, write stuff down. You own this. This is your company. It's okay to make hard decisions. It's okay to there was so much to learn in that because it was the first time I had been through that, and it took some work with my executive coach and talking to an HR consultant to make sure I had the legal stuff right. And there were many components to it. It meant behind the scenes trying to replace that person. And so taking that leap, it it actually was the best thing that I've done for my business probably so far, and it ended up being the best thing for her. She thanked me later. I
Wow.
never ever thought that she would understand why I asked her to leave. And she came to me, we met for coffee about a month later, and she looked at me and said, "Thank you so much for being brave enough to do for me what I couldn't do for myself."
Oh, wow.
Wow.
And she talked about how much better her life is now and how she saw how everything was playing out. Once it was over, she saw what I had been going through and how I had really tried. I had so tried to make it work. And so that really helped me learn to trust myself and to trust my gut and my instincts. And if I'm really feeling like something is off, to not be afraid to tackle it, not be afraid to lean into the hard stuff, because we grow so much through and having her on the team wasn't a mistake. It just was part of the journey. She was great on the team for a while, and then it just ended up, we evolved so much. And like you guys, when you're in kind of growth scale startup mode, it's just different. And so it just became just not a good fit. And that was nothing against her and nothing against us. It just was what it was. And from there, our team is stronger now. We are, we're ending the year on a much higher note than we were in the middle of the year. And I'm feeling much more confident as a leader to make hard decisions and to lean into that stuff. So that's probably my biggest thing from the year. This has been an interesting year for everybody, I think.
Yeah.
So,
It
whew,
has been. Yeah.
yeah.
That's a
What about
big
you
one.
guys?
Well, I don't, that was a big one. And I think one of the things that you just said that I want to affirm, because I've had a version of this years ago. And unfortunately, I still need them because I still forget what the hell I'm confident in and why. But your remark about them coming back around and thanking you, that doesn't happen very often that the
No,
leader's going to have that. But I think that
no.
the truth still remains the same of as a leader, you identified that you were the wrong fit for the person and that team didn't work for them anymore. And a lot of times it's like you're in an abusive relationship almost where the person can't see that it's not a good fit until they get out of it.
Yeah.
And they may not come back and thank you, but the fact that you freed them really is what your responsibility is as a leader.
Yeah.
Even if they never come back and say that was the best thing ever,
Mhm.
guarantee they're going to get over it and move on and have a better experience than they would have just hanging on
Yeah.
for dear life. That's cool, man. Good for you. That's a big one. That's
And I
not
had accepted that maybe she would never come back to me. I didn't think that she would. I didn't know what our friendship was going to be after, and I didn't expect her to come back. But yeah, I totally agree with you. And I'm never a fan of some people say things like, we're releasing you to your future and things like that. I've never really been a fan of those kind of phrases, but I was so careful and intentional about making sure it wasn't personal. Nothing I said was personal. It just was, this
Yeah.
just isn't the right fit anymore. And so
Dude, good for
yeah.
you. Good
Yeah.
for you. That one's tough, man.
Oh yeah, it is.
What about you guys?
I have.
Brandon, you had a story brewing, so
All right. So, okay. I'm not sure why. Okay. Chris and I, and as individuals, I've had lots of scenarios over the last probably 10 years that kind of a tough time. You go through it, you pull out on the other side, and you're like, wow, that was really, it was elevating to some extent, right? Like I got a new set of tools, a new way of framing how I think about myself, about our companies, and all the things. This year, it seems like that's been on rapid fire since like January 1st.
mhm.
Like week in and week out, almost by sometimes day in and day out, there are these moments that we've had to face a challenge. We've had to have a conversation. We're bringing in a lot more, I would just say, we're bringing in a lot of very competent people into our sphere. We've been very diligent about that. We've been honored that we have the respect of people like that, and so our sphere changed so much this year, internally and externally, that it's intimidated the living shit out of me.
Mm.
Like I just
Hmm.
realized I literally had to send an email to somebody last week that basically said, "Hey, my response to that is because if I'm honest, is because I get intimidated by you, and sometimes I don't respond the way that I should." Literally, I had an email exchange last week, but I have felt like this all year long.
I got to stop you real fast because I heard you say that to a particular individual that I think you're referring
Yeah,
to
yeah,
live in a conversation.
yeah,
And I really respected the hell out of that because I think that is so hard for most, and I would say even more so men, but I know it's not just a guy thing because I know that women feel the same kind of intimidation.
Yeah.
But I think there's more of an expectation maybe on men to not be intimidated, to not let
Oh,
on
hmm,
that you're feeling
yes.
that way. And so
yeah,
that was one of the things I really admired. There's been a couple times this year where I've heard you say that in the moment with that person, and I imagine for you that on the other side of that, it felt pretty freeing to just
yeah.
get that off your chest and not have to pose.
It does. Like, and I think that's the thing that kind of it's both good and pisses me off at the same time is I feel like with situations like this, I have the memory of like a goldfish. Where it's like every single situation I go in with the same level of
Yep.
anxiety and heightened awareness and all the worries and all the things. And every time, inevitably, I get on the other side of doing what I wanted to do, but I just knew it was just intimidatingly uncomfortable. And every single time I'm rewarded for the effort or that move or that priority. And yet I go into every situation like trying to retalk myself into
Mhm.
having to do that. So you're spot on. It was very freeing. Um, and it's this weird dichotomy of it's freeing and it also kind of feels like sometimes when you say those things out loud, then it's like now they're real. And then you're like, okay, well, all right, well, what do I do? So what? I was intimidated. Now what? What am I doing about it? How do I not remain intimidated? How do I shift out of this? It's just been a very demanding year. And it's been interesting because this has probably been the year that Chris and I as a team have been faced with the most opportunity. In fact, it's ramping exponentially right now with just being invited to
Mhm.
have some very serious conversations about opportunities and possibilities with really great people.
Mhm.
And it's just like so the intimidation with the opportunities ramping and at the same time it's like but you're being invited for a reason. So what are you going to do with that? Like how do I convince myself to be as confident as the person on the other side of the
Mhm.
table is? And I don't I have good answers, but I don't I think living those things out consistently is just really it's really hard. It's just freaking difficult, man.
I feel like, one of the things, and it relates to this, is I've just felt this calling this year to become more honest
Mhm.
in the way that I carry myself. I just, the older I get, the more I find myself in those situations, and I notice inside me there's this intense pressure to perform and to present myself in a certain way as maybe being more confident than I actually am, or more, in some cases, more knowledgeable or experienced than I actually might be. Um, when I feel intimidated and I come into
Yeah.
those scenarios, is I kind of work overtime trying to leverage my intellect
Mhm.
to present myself in a particular way when internally I'm feeling very conflicted or unsure of myself. I've just noticed that, and that this is just, it keeps coming up for me. It's the internal question that I'm asking myself is, why do I feel such an intense pressure to act like a certain way versus just showing up the way I am and being
Mhm.
honest? And the times where we've done this, I feel like whenever I am actually honest about what's happening internally, it almost always creates more of a connection with the other person,
Yeah.
and it results in their respect. Like more often than not,
Hmm.
when I'm honest about maybe coming into a conversation, or when I'm honest about being not equal in the conversation, hey, I don't understand what we're talking about. I mean, it just takes a variety of forms, right? Being honest. But when I do, I feel like it tends to build the trust and connection I have with that other person
Yes.
significantly faster
Yeah.
and more deeply
Yeah.
than when I'm posing and trying to act like I am aligned with this person, or you know what I mean? And so
Yep.
that's been both kind of troubling in a way and also inspiring. Like I think all of us want to go into every conversation being really confident,
Yeah.
and yet I think that's just not reality. And I think, like, to your point, dude, this has been such a huge growth year for us. We've been
Yeah.
showing up at tables and in conversations with folks that
Yeah.
I think 4 years ago you and I just never would have
No.
anticipated.
No.
And when you show up to a big table, metaphorically speaking, um, there's a real pressure I think that comes with it, to feel like you need to justify your seat at the table, like why you
Yep.
deserve to be there. And
Yep.
sometimes the reality is you don't feel like you deserve to be there. You're like, wow, how how did this happen?
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes, instead of just feeling gratitude for being at the table and being like, wow, okay, now how do I learn what's required in order for me to
Mhm.
stay here? There's this pressure. You feel like you have to pretend.
Yeah.
You have to
Yep.
pretend like you belong there. And anyway, I mean, I don't know if anybody relates to this. Sounds like you guys do, but
I'm sure that people do.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the whole fake it till you make it kind of mentality or imposter syndrome. And yeah, all the time. Very constant. I'm curious in these, as you're getting more and more of these opportunities, how are you deciding what's for you and what's not? Where are you finding your no? I have a couple things in my business where it's like if it doesn't align with these things, then I know that this probably isn't the direction for us. But I've gone through similar situations, I think, to the two of you, and also feel very probably like you do when you're in these conversations, you really want to serve these people well. You're
Yeah.
thankful to be there and
Yep.
you want to make sure that you are serving this relationship exceptionally well. And then I've also just learned sometimes that I can't. Like, I don't actually have necessarily the resources that you're looking for. But
Yeah.
anyway, I'm curious
Good.
how you're weeding through all of these opportunities because you can't say yes to everything, no matter how much we want to, and we shouldn't say yes to everything sometimes. So,
Yeah.
do you have a way that you're weeding through them?
Yeah,
I
we
think
have
we're
to.
trying to figure that out. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I think, for me personally, this year, I think the challenge has been probably most rooted in, let's see, is this, I think it's been most rooted in how quickly do I want to give myself, and even in my partnership with Chris, us, the freedom to lean into what we want versus what we feel like we have to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as business owners, this is a common element
Yep.
to the journey, right? I think it's what prevents us from getting out of the self-employed status. I think this stuff makes it hard to get past the, if you're a restorer, you get to 3, 5, 6 million, and then there's this new push that demands a lot different tool set. And so this year, it's like I feel like we're being approached by the things that give me the most excitement. And I think what I'm trying to understand is it okay for me, us, to move into these positions faster than what the kind of startup mentality would require from us, if this is making sense? So let me try to make it less cryptic. Um, Floodlight is a young company. We
Yep.
have a lot of infrastructure and things. This year was an infrastructure year. Holy cow.
Yep.
It was a big lift this year, which we're totally excited and exhausted about. Um, but we did that because when Chris and I started Floodlight, we never wanted to be self-employed. That we don't have any interest in being a slave to our own business. We've always wanted to build a business as a business. And this was our first year, I think, where we felt the most friction in that process and got over it. And fortunately,
Yep.
Wayne, for any of us that has listened to the show more than once, you've probably heard his name. We are
Mm-hmm.
equally thankful for everyone on our team and the role that they have. Wayne has played a special lift in the company in terms of because of his specific skill set. It changed a lot for us, and it helped us do this year what we need to do, and it'll continue to elevate the team. Okay, all that to be said, if you look, I'm trying to find the balance here of total transparency and then what is distracting. If you look at fundamentally how we manage our business, we definitely did some pre-spending.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, clearly, and that's part of the plan. That's how it goes. And I think sometimes I get around business leaders and I hear them talk, and it's like they can have no Waynes and do all the things and still somehow have the fuel in their tank to do these other things that they're excited about, motivated to do. And they have this interesting relationship to the business where they're in the weeds and out of the weeds simultaneously. And I've just found this year that ain't me, babe.
Yeah.
Like, I ain't going to do that. I can't. And so, what I've found myself doing is pre investing, moving out of certain functions faster than probably somebody might say to.
Yep.
And then I get this dumb mental gymnastics I begin doing in my mind is, well, then am I even bringing the value to the company that I should be if I'm not doing XYZ responsibility? And that's what I've been wrestling this year. It's like I hire a guy like Wayne who just freaking straight up kicks ass in his
Mm-hmm.
responsibilities and at times really does most of them better than I can do them anyways. And then somehow I'll sit in on a Saturday morning and over process the fact that I got a guy like that on my team, and then I'm asking myself, where should my attention go? Well, F me. That's what I hired him in the first place for. So why I'm doing those mental gymnastics, I really don't understand it. I don't know if this is making any
No,
sense at all.
it makes perfect sense.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think underneath all of that, one of the ways that we're evaluating opportunities, we had a really key opportunity earlier this year that we took a lot of forward steps on to vet that opportunity. We were looking at essentially acquiring another business unit for Floodlight, and both of us stepped back. We had a conversation on our members. We're in our studio here. There's another little office adjacent to Brandon and I's offices in our building space here. And I remember standing there, and we both just looked at each other and we're like, does this feel right? What we're about to do? Because it's going to have this element and it's going to have this element, and we're going to have to really lean hard into these two things. Is that really what you want to do? And both of us just said no, and we walked away from that. Unfortunately, we didn't have to put a bunch of capital into the exploration of it. We got out before we got too far in, which you can't always do. Sometimes you got to spend money to figure that out. But and then right now we're evaluating a couple opportunities, and I think inevitably we're going to make the same judgment. Right? Is what this is going to require of us something we feel motivated and inspired to do? Like, what are the heaviest investments we're going to have to make into these things to make it work and to make it pay?
And do we want to do that?
And do we want to do a ton of that? And I think because for Brandon and I, are we money motivated? 100%, of course. Of course we are. I think you can't be in business and at least not have that as part of your motivation.
Yeah.
Of course.
Right?
Not doing it for free.
But at the same time, we've also agreed philosophically and I think emotionally that neither one of us wants to sacrifice our now life
Yeah.
for the promise of building an empire someday.
Yep.
Like we're not willing to sacrifice the now for the tomorrow empire. Because of course, all of us, I think on this call, have experienced some state of unexpected loss, enough to realize there ain't no guarantee that we're going to get to the 10-year mark when our pro forma looks like this and our driveway looks full of that, right? It's like, we don't know. And so it's really important for Brandon and I to try to find that balance, to do that dance of, okay, just how much of our current life and our life force are we willing to give to that thing? And so part of the judgment is, what am I good at and what do I enjoy? I think it's kind of the filter that we've been learning to apply, where it's like, okay, I could do that. I could figure out how, here's one example for me. And some people are going to be like, wow, Nordike, it's really foolish of you, bro. Here's what I've started to learn about myself in my 40s. Here's what I've started to learn about myself. I have a couple of really close buddies that are really into real estate, and they're really good at it. They mortgaged their house to buy a duplex, 15 years ago, and then they 1031'd that duplex into an eightplex, and then they bought another thing, and then they got some hard money, and they figured out that game, and now they've got 25 units or 100 units. So one of my buddies has done 150 flips in the last 10 years. And he's been extraordinarily successful. And there's a part of me that's like, I need to freaking get on that bandwagon. I need to go leverage some money, go find one of my buddies' hard money lenders, go do this. And then my wife and I'll do this in the evenings and weekends. And then I'll have my kids kind of manage the rental portfolio and all this stuff. And you know what I figured out, and I've finally been able to be honest with myself, is I have no freaking desire to do that. Not only do I not want to spend my life in little spreadsheets and P&Ls for all my little properties and see where my debt service is at and when I should refi, I just don't want to do that. I don't want to make money that way. Now, the exception to that would be as Brandon and I, as some of our business ventures and stuff are playing out, will I eventually maybe own some real estate and have a management company do that stuff? Probably. Yeah. It's like one of those smart things you put money into. Yeah. But I just realized I'm not that guy. And I have, I guess, depending on how you look at it, I've probably left a lot of money on the table. I'm probably behind in some of my investment goals than some of my buddies are that have taken that path. But I've just realized for me, I prefer to build and run service companies.
Hmm.
And and I also have certain things that I'm really extraordinarily good at in running a business or participating in a business. The other thing that Brandon and I think collectively have learned is neither one of us wants to be a solo entrepreneur. And I've tried that previously in my time. I've had 3 or 4 LLCs in my life, a couple of which have been more successful than others, where I've been the guy, the single owner, and I'm just not at my best. And there's a lot of risks with the business partnership. We've
sure.
seen some ones that haven't played out very well. I mean, all of us have seen business partnerships that fail and crash and burn. And I think Brandon and I feel really lucky. We have enough of a he and I are different enough and alike enough that it's really worked well.
Yep.
We have friction, we have hard stuff we got to deal
Of
with every
course.
now and then, but I think both of us just recognize that we're better together, and both of us function better in a team ownership type of thing than both of us because you've had your own companies before too, and it's like so all of these things I think boil down to I'm starting to learn to be more honest with myself. and and I'm finding freedom and I'm also finding energy in that. You know,
Hmm.
when I stop posing and pretending, when I can just lay down, you know what? I'm not going to get into the whole real estate flip thing, and I'm not gonna listen to Deeper Pockets, you know, on iTunes every freaking week, and I'm not gonna freaking learn and read all the books about real estate investing because I just don't want to do it, and
Yep.
I never have. It's never captivated me, and I have these other things that captivate me that it turns out I'm pretty good at. And what happens if I dump all my fuel
Yep.
into that fire? I think the money will eventually follow the way I want it to, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Good.
I agree. And I'm with you on the real estate because I've had people also like, Michelle, you start investing and doing real estate stuff. And I am like, that sounds like the worst. I would hate that. I don't even like, I am not ever. I also believe in, even with in the world of investing, slow and steady wins the race. I believe that, in some ways you can end up in the same place down the road if you are faithful in your investing in yourself and smart about it. So it's just being way more patient. You're not going to realize a whole bunch of cash all at once, but I'm risk averse when it comes to money. So I've kind of also been like that in my business. But I want to go back to what you were talking about too, about like feeling okay to remove yourself from certain roles as being a business owner. I think that that's so interesting because society tends to get in our heads so much and feel like we let society dictate what we can or should not do so much, right? And business owners are prone to feeling guilty when it's like, well, I feel like I should be doing that. I felt that way about hiring editor Lauren as our editor and feeling like, well, I should be doing all the editorial. I should be doing all of this, but she's way better at it. Like, and that's, with Wayne, I know Wayne and he is very talented and these people come in and are meant to be in these roles. And so, I think the faster we can, fire ourselves from certain roles in our businesses, the better we're going to be able to focus on the areas that we excel and can help it grow. And, none of us should be caught in the weeds of certain things anyway. So the more we can let society not dictate how our businesses should grow. I think both of us, probably you so more so than me, have felt probably more fuel in the first few years than maybe normal businesses feel. And so we have had that rocket fuel that's kind of helped us launch and get going. And that does require, I think, faster evolution into being a more mature business than maybe you would expect to be.
Yeah.
So
I agree with that. Yeah. I
yeah.
think so.
So you just have to ride the rocket and figure it out as you go and
Yeah.
hope you don't fall off. I don't know.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. One of the one of the things I feel like that's been really front and center kind of related to what you're talking about is for most of my life I've wrestled with this identity of jack of all trades. And and the reason like I just started to come to terms with it is that almost everything that I've done, I have this really rapid ascension through several ranks. And I get past the hack and I get past the doing it because you have to stage of development. And I begin to actually understand the core competencies and how to leverage, let's say, certain tool sets or certain perspectives in my favor to do that role. And I've been that way my whole life. And yet most of the time, if I stay too narrow in terms of what that role is requiring from me, I eventually hit a wall where my motivation level or like the attractive driver for me to this nuance of that type of role and that core function and responsibility begins to wane.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden I'm looking at it, I start getting bored. I don't want to give the level of attention it takes to go to the next 10,000 hours of competency. And I've wrestled with that my whole career. I skyrocket into recognition, I skyrocket into certain levels of responsibility, and then it begins to taper off. And 99% of the time, it's because I'm a starter by nature.
Yeah.
And so then I just get into this cycle where it really requires the
Yep.
consistency and I begin to falter. And for most of my life, that thing that I've recognized about myself has always kind of been seen quietly behind the scenes from me as a weakness.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I've found, and again, I don't know that I would stand up and beat my chest about it yet, but I'm starting to get really comfortable with the fact that it's my natural bend towards being a jack of all trades that actually helps me build teams
Mm.
because I will learn enough about each role to be dangerous. And so then I begin to get a pretty clear understanding of what it takes
Yep.
for somebody to be the 20,000 hour person in that role or function. And I think now, and again, this is at such a baby stage that I can't say it with a lot of confidence yet, but it's this combination of I get really excited about the launch. I'm comfortable with the fact that my jack of all trades syndrome, it allows me to have a deeper understanding of a wide breadth of skills and talents.
Yeah.
And then finally, if I can roll that in to to trusting myself to only do the things I'm excited about, I feel like that is the superpower.
Yep.
But I struggle to walk in the door with that in the toolkit, just being
Yeah.
honest about it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And
yeah, dude.
confident about it.
I've got an external view for you on that because I hear what you're saying, and I've seen you leaning into that this year.
Mhm.
And what I've seen you do is you're leveraging that ability to quickly learn and skill up in a particular
Mhm.
way, just enough that you can delegate well and then move on to the new thing. And that is a superpower
Mhm.
to be able to learn. I mean, I think it's the speed at which you're able to learn and apply yourself, the drive that you have to get excited, to put a ton of energy behind a certain thing, to get it to this point where, as an example, you can hand it off to Wayne with enough clarity and vision that then Wayne can run full
Oh, yeah.
bore with that thing. And I feel like I've seen you do that really throughout our relationship in different types of roles. But I agree, like that is one of your superpowers, is that ability to skill up quickly and then recognize when you're skilled up to the point where you can hand it off effectively to somebody.
Yeah.
And then you get to go chase the
Yeah.
new start,
Yeah.
Mhm.
which of course we've had lots of new starts.
Oh.
You know, it's just kind of this unfolding
Yeah.
of growth and opportunity with this company, but it's only really accelerated as we've been able to grow the team,
Yeah.
right? And allow the team to start to take some of that vision and run with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a question along these lines of like year in review. Any behaviors, specific behaviors that you've decided to change this past year or are in the middle of changing? And I'm going to talk about one. I'll throw one out here that's been more recent for Brandon and I. So
Okay.
we joked about. I can't remember if we were recording yet or not when we said this, but so Brandon, this seems kind of funny, so I'll open it up with a lighthearted thing. But Brandon and I have been working on using better language.
Oh yeah, that's the most recent one.
We had a conference we spoke at uh, well 2 months ago, maybe 2.5 months ago.
A month ago.
I don't know, late summer, September, October. Anyways,
Oh yeah.
and one of our friends was there, who's a fairly prominent industry leader, and I had a sidebar conversation with her. So Brandon and I were essentially running this full 2-day workshop at this conference, and so we had lots of front stage time, and we were using a fairly regular cadence of salty language, which
Okay.
which I think up to this, it's really interesting, my history with cussing, because I grew up in a very sort of Southern Baptist kind of, yeah. Okay, thank you, Michelle.
Not full
Oh
cussing,
man, hey,
but we've got these. I love them. So
we all
keep
come
going.
from somewhere, so so I grew up in a real churchy environment where cussing was very much kind of categorized as a sin, if you will, and unwholesome talk, right? And then for the most part, I didn't really cuss until I got into the restoration industry. And I think part of it was a desire to sort of connect with my peoples
Sure.
and just kind of fit in with the culture. And part of it was I just sort of started to enjoy the saltiness. And that just carried on. And now it's been, I don't know, we're going on 10, 12 years or whatever. And so fast forward to this conference, and I'm having this sidebar conversation with this industry leader. And I said, "Hey, just get honest feedback. How have you felt about the workshop so far? What do you think about the content?" She's like, "Oh man, it's really great." She said, "The only thing that really detracts is just how much cursing you guys are doing." I was like, "Okay." And I knew she was mostly talking about Brandon, and so I wasn't as offended.
Wow.
that
Right under the bus there. Perfect.
was awesome.
And he may not be wrong.
I couldn't
so.
resist that. Brandon is I mean, he has army background too on top of all this. So
Yeah,
it's
it's
like
hard.
they have like 9 words that they use repeatedly. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, and 8 of them are the F word.
Yeah.
So anyway, I took that feedback to Brandon, and we joked about it, and then we modulated our language for the remainder of that, and it was great, and she felt better about the delivery. But that stuck with me. So then we had another conference we were at, and some salt came out in our conversation, and we actually got a text message from our friend in this particular group, and he's like, "Hey, listen, you guys are not boring, and that's the worst sin. So you're good, like everything's good, but can we dial back the language?" And so finally, Brandon and I, coming out of that,
Time to
we
iterate.
we just had a decision to make, and here's where we landed, because I think I've given a lot of thought to this, and one of the things is we have a whole new class of consultants that are new Floodlight consultants are coming in January to headquarters, and I've been assigned to give sort of a brand values talk to this group as our company president, and I was thinking about this a lot. Here's why I've landed on the whole cursing thing. I think for me, I think it's entirely possible for a person of character to use salty language.
Yep.
Like I think
I
when I grew up, it was just sort of arbitrarily seen as bad. People that use cuss words, it's bad, you know. And I think now I'm in a different place where it's like, no, I know plenty of people of character that use salty language. But here's the thing I have noticed, and where I think the character comes in. I think that it's our responsibility as leaders to know what room we're in and who our audience is.
Yeah.
And I think the sign of character is knowing where you're at and who you're talking to, and
Yeah.
and the way that they need to be spoken to.
Hmm.
And I think that's the error I think that Brandon and I have made at times with perhaps um, the podcast. Now we're not saying that the podcast is all of a sudden not going to have an explicit rating like it does. But I think context is everything as a leader and
Yeah.
just as a person. That
Yep.
character is really a function of um, is understanding who we're with and what the room needs from us.
Hmm.
And so I think there's character and I think there's style. And I think it's possible to have a style that maybe uses curse words selectively. That's part of your style, and you modulate that style based on the situation and the people you're around, you know. And so I think for us at Floodlight, this is kind of a value that's emerging. It's taken us a while to figure it out, you know. But I think as a company, what we're starting to lean towards is that when we're on stage or we're in some kind of public forum and media, we're not going to curse. And then when we're with people, one to one or in small groups or in a private setting, I think probably from a character standpoint, the best move is to follow people's style. Whereas
Yep.
if I'm with somebody and they use the F word or they use the S word or they say, you know, some other phrase that might be uncomfortable for other people, right? If they lead with that, well, then I can follow that and I can try to match their style. I think that's how we relate to one another a lot of times, right?
Yep.
Not to say somebody has to cuss in order to make
Yeah.
friends, but
No.
but I just mean, to me, that seems from a character standpoint like the best policy as a company is, okay, we're gonna follow other people's style in a personal context, but when it's public, we're gonna restrain our language, right? So as not to offend, because I think the thing we want to avoid is we want to avoid missing out on relationships that we otherwise might had because we led with the wrong style.
Yeah, I think that's good.
You know, we offended before we ever had a chance to cultivate relationship. And
Yes.
I don't ever want to do that. I don't ever want to sacrifice a potentially awesome relationship because I feel a need to drop F bombs, right? So that's been a thing, you know, and it's forced me just to think about character, but like beyond just cussing. It's like, okay, what about other mannerisms and things I might choose to talk to one on one with or talk about one on one with somebody? I don't want that to prevent me from a relationship or an opportunity,
Yeah.
or the ability to help somebody because
Yeah.
I've offended them before I ever had a chance to create relationship, you know?
How
Yeah.
about you, Michelle? Anything you're iterating this year that's just you found profoundly important?
Mine's been learning to say no.
Really?
I get a lot of the comments of, wow, you're everywhere. Wow, you must travel a lot. Wow, you do all these things, blah, blah, blah. And you guys are the same way. You travel a lot and attend a lot of events. And the first few years of startup mode, you kind of have to, right? You need to be everywhere. You need to have your face as many places as possible. And then I think you get to a point where it's like, okay, for one, I kind of just burned myself out. It was just
Yeah.
too much, and I was trying to be everything to everyone. And um, there are just I have found, especially like in the realm of speaking, I really enjoy leading panels. I love leading panel discussions. I do not love being the person that's up on the stage as the expert. I actually don't consider myself an industry expert. I consider myself the intermediary to help other people be the experts. I want to elevate the experts that are in the industry and help give them the stage so that their voices, like you two are a great example, your voices can be heard. I do not consider myself an expert. I'm a connector of people. That's my role. That's C&R's role. C&R is just a vehicle to help share knowledge. So I'm grateful that I get a lot of invites to a lot of events and a lot of invites to speak. I just got one a few weeks ago, actually, that was to an event that I had been wanting to attend and was looking forward to being part of for a long time. And it happened to come at it's the event's a couple days after I come back from an international trip with my MBA, and I had to say no. And I was disappointed about that. And it's learning to trust that even when I need to say no to things that I do think are for me and that excite me, those opportunities will come back around if they really are meant for me. A
Yeah.
lot of opportunities aren't like this one time, it's like you do it now or never. Some are, and then you just need to do them then. But industry events and speaking and things like that, those opportunities will probably come again. And so it is learning to, I think, especially because I have little kids, and I appreciated what you were saying earlier about like not wanting to give up your life now to have that empire later. Like, let's find the balance in this as we go and not just sacrifice ourselves to our businesses and miss our families. And so my big goal right now is to be as present for my kids and my family as I possibly can be. And I'm just learning to better manage my time so that I don't feel like I went through a period where I felt like I gave almost everything that I had to the industry and had nothing left.
Yeah.
Um, and I love the industry. And so I love doing that. It was just, this year was just difficult, I think. And there was a lot that happened, and it was a slow year for restorers, a slow year for a lot of the vendors. It just was a difficult year. And going through my MBA at the same time, and
Ooh.
it just,
Wow.
it was a lot.
Yeah.
So, but learning to say no and having the feeling like I'm giving myself permission to say no when I've really evaluated an opportunity and whether or not it's right for us is great. And I'm looking forward to further building up my team and them being able to go without me to events. We're very close to that happening. I'm really hoping that Lauren, our editor, will start doing some podcasting or something like that herself, because I need to not be the only voice that's coming out of C&R. Just like you guys have, some of your consultants also kind of have their voices out and about, whether it's Scott or Mike or whatever. Wayne has some voice as well. That is so key and so important. So it's one, saying no so that I'm not spread so thin that I have nothing left. And two, finding those opportunities and trying to bring my team more into the fold so that they're going to also become, more recognized in the industry. I think Tasha, who does sales and is our production manager, I think she is getting pretty close to that. There are a lot of people that recognize her and ask about her if she doesn't come to a show with me. So I don't know.
Big shift.
Learning to say no
Uh,
is critical. I remind myself, which also kind of goes back to some comments you made earlier. I remind myself often that my kids are only little for a little while.
yeah.
And, a decade from now, I'm gonna have all the time that I want to pour into my business and to keep growing it or diversifying or acquiring or whatever. And so it has been trying to figure out what is my goal with the business now. And also realizing that those things change, right? Because your reason for owning a business today might change tomorrow. Like, I don't plan to sell the business anytime soon, so that's not why I own it. I'm not going in it to sell it or make money that way, but I am in it to provide a steady life for my family and to be able to pick my kids up every single day at 3, unless I'm traveling, and to take them to school every morning and not have to miss anything. I don't miss sporting events. I don't. That was actually something, kind of talking about this saying no, something that I learned in the orientation with my MBA. We started talking about, which I think you guys, and I think we talked about this together on another podcast we did maybe last year, but having like hard boundaries. And one of the boundaries I had set with my MBA team was I don't miss Levi's hockey games. Those are important to me. That's good family time. I don't miss that. And just having those non-negotiables is what we called them, setting non-negotiables for yourself and then allowing yourself to hold on to those, I think can be so valuable. So that's like my one non-negotiable that I have. But then I never felt guilty because
Uh,
I didn't have to miss a game. And I also, my team, the expectations were set, and I didn't miss that much at all because of the hockey games. But um, no one felt bad. It just was what it was, and everybody understood. It's the same being a leader with your team, right? I'm sure that you have non-negotiables with your team that you two have set boundaries, whether it's like this night's date night, or I'm not going to be around. I'm going to work out at this time in the morning and don't plan to be able to get a hold of me unless something's on fire in that hour or whatever it is. But having those non-negotiables, I think, is so vital as especially a business owner. Otherwise, you're just open to getting burned out.
yeah. It's funny. I don't know if you've noticed this too, Michelle, is do you see that the more diligent you are at mapping out the non-negotiables, that you actually end up getting everything done that you needed to in the time frame that you've allotted yourself?
Yes. I'm way more efficient and way better at getting stuff done now that I've actually considerably shortened my work hours this year and the time that I'm like in the office.
Yeah.
That's not to say that I am the type that will like reshoot back an email at a random time if I have time, if it's not taking away from something, but I still get everything done and then some, and it's fine.
Yeah, it's that whole freedom and discipline thing. Like sometimes I look at my own schedule, my own calendar, and it kind of makes me want to throw up because there's color on just about every free spot
Oh yeah.
on that calendar. And
Yep.
though, the advantage of it is like I actually don't work a ton after,
Yep.
5 p.m.
Yep.
I do. I still think, I still process, I still consider the business. And if we got to talk to a team member or late night, yeah, I'll catch myself
I do
saying
still
that.
get some
But
emails
I
from
do.
4:30 a.m. in the morning.
I
Or,
do. I am a morning guy. That's when it's really no holds
yeah.
barred. But I
Holds
have
hard.
found this year that I've gotten an unbelievable amount of work done in
Yep.
during the day, during the work day,
Mm,
because I started this year and said, I'm not gonna blow up my family this year.
mm.
Like I'm not gonna not be home. I'm
Yep.
not going to screw around with the
Good for you.
Good job.
I'm
About that.
that was a slow catch. I'm not gonna screw around with my relationship with my wife or my kids because it's like that talk several years ago. Like I won't be surrounded by nameplates of the business. I won't have a bunch of employees in my room in the hospital. I'm not
Yep.
gonna have the truck I like. I'm not. It's hopefully there's some humans in there that I'm related to. And I didn't crap all over that because I just kept punting them and their needs because
Yes.
I was building our
Mm.
business. You know what I mean? And man, I got to tell you, like as hard as things have been in the business this year, and life always has stuff at home with your kids and your family, I
Crazy.
haven't felt bad about the way I conducted myself this year, and that helps a lot.
Mm.
Like even just dealing with life's challenges when I don't have that thing over my left shoulder that tells me I'm failing miserably at home in my home relationships, it's like I tend to have a lot more wherewithal to deal with the bullshit that comes with
Yeah.
the business and life because I'm like, hey, I've got some concrete foundation set, and that's my family,
Mm.
my
Yep.
sphere. And you just kind of iterate and go with the punches sometimes when it comes to the business. But I feel
Yep.
like I've had a lot more stability because I prioritized that this year. And Chris and I were very intentional about that when we started Floodlight. Like, and he has to remind me, like, hey, we're not blowing this up, right? Mid route. Like we said we were going to be convicted about this, and it's been surprisingly, I don't want to say easy, but it's been surprisingly simple to do, believe it or not, as we booted up Floodlight. So
I think part of it is what you realize is just how much ego is involved with burning the candle at both ends.
Uh-huh.
There's a lot of ego in not certainly not our industry, but just in the whole startup kind of environment
Yep.
around, sleeping
20
sleeping at the
hours.
office and blowing up your marriage for the sake of your startup and like,
Yep.
and of course I don't think anybody actually looks at that admiringly. It's just a lot of it's just jealousy. It's
Mhm.
the greed, it's the money that causes us to accept that culture
Yeah.
Yep.
because
Pastor.
it's like and I think unfortunately like Dave Ramsey gets co-opted I think in this kind of entrepreneurial culture where it's like do what other people are unwilling to do so you can live like how others are unable to
Yes.
later on. That's this sort of thing, like
Yes.
deny yourself now and
Yep.
nose to the grindstone, work harder than anybody else now so you can live
Yep.
better than them, blah blah blah. And I think most people realize that, well, one, sometimes it just doesn't work out. Just because you're working your ass off doesn't mean you're going to be a multimillionaire. It
Yeah.
can still blow up, and then it blows up, and you don't have your family either, And it's like, okay, well, if I can get past my ego and my own sense of greed, I think it's possible to do a lot of productivity during the day in just an 8 to 5 grind, so to speak, if I'm serious about it, if I'm committed to that. And like you talked about, I mean, holy cow, MBA, hockey, small children, marriage, and publishing business. And you found in many ways you're more productive when you have all of those when you create space for all those other things,
Yep.
partly because you have to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've found some of that as well. I do have one curious thing though for you, Michelle, because I know so much of your work is creative work,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's selling ads, sales conversations, or creative work, right? As well
Yep.
as magazine layouts and giving your opinion on stuff. I One thing I've struggled with this year because we've had this theme of kind of overcoming and like insights and realization and positive change. Well, one thing that I, I'm thinking about for this coming year is a lot of the work I do is very creative in nature.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to have less task oriented things as a part of the lion's share of my work, and more creative production that I end up doing, whether it be designing talks or creating content and things of that sort. And I found it very hard to organize myself by time blocks and planned work
Mhm.
sessions,
Yep.
because it it's possible, and I've heard writers talk about this, um, and I think part of it's discipline that I need to cultivate, because I sit down to, say, record a training module for our one of our master courses or something. The team is counting on me to get it done by a certain date, right?
Mhm.
So we can
Mhm.
have production schedules and project management, right, within our company. It's very important. And oftentimes I arrive to that time block and I'm just either not in the right headspace. I had a difficult interaction with my wife or my kids, and I'm still like, my head just isn't right for the creative work. And I stew and I spin my wheels, and I might spend 3 hours and get nothing out of it. You know,
Uh-huh.
I've had a number of nights here at the office where I'll get I've had a few Fridays this year where I'll get to 6 o'clock and I'm texting my wife. I'm like, I've got one more video. It's a 4 minute video I need to do. I'll be home as soon. And then at 7 o'clock, I'm texting her, honey, I'm still working on it. And then 8 o'clock rolls around, and I just can't. Sometimes I nail it in the 11th hour, and then other times I'm like, crap, I just got to cut the cord and come in tomorrow. Like, have you learned a way? Have you been able to overcome this? And do you have any tips for that, of how to deal with creative work? And I think for business owners listening to this, there's a lot of creative aspects to running a restoration
For
company.
sure. It's
So
your
I thought,
vision time. This
yeah,
is your
yeah, it's
strat
vision
time.
time, it's strategic planning time, it's thinking about your marketing, your sales, like how are we going to grow, like all this kind of stuff. How do you how do you manage that, Michelle, in such a creative business?
Great question. I am 1000% a procrastinator by trade. By trade, literally, like I could own a business in procrastination, which doesn't serve well for MBA or publishing. Just wow. Um, so what I have found is that I am well intentioned and I will try to start. I use motion as kind of like to block out my time a little bit, which
Mm.
does work really well for me, and it keeps me within the work hours that I want to be. And will redistribute something if I ended up not getting it done that day. And you can put hard deadlines in there. So if it redistributes it for you a couple times, but there's a hard deadline, eventually it's going to be like, hey, you have to get this done.
Oh,
I have found that once I'm up against a hard deadline, I can get stuff done, and that is usually where I'm the most creative. I
yeah.
seem to need that
Right.
definitive hard deadline for the creative stuff to actually be there. But something that I also learned really early in my career, I guess, in journalism itself, I had read Sandberg's book from Facebook, and she had said, "Done is better than perfect sometimes." And all of us, I know all of us want things to be perfect, but I also remind myself that the outside doesn't necessarily know the bar you've set for yourself in this project. They don't know how in your brain you intentioned this to be.
Yeah.
So from the outside, this could be high quality and look perfect. To you, it might not be, but it might be done and you probably did it well.
Yeah.
So I've learned to accept, like, sometimes done is better than perfect. It depends on what it is, but some things just don't need to be, we can't make everything perfect. It's not possible. And so I've had to learn that with myself. I started to, back when I first got into the industry, another publication, right? I struggled when I would put out a magazine that I didn't feel like was as good as the one before. Well, it's impossible to have a better magazine than the one before every single time. That is completely impossible. There's going to be some rock stars every year, and there are going to be some others that are going to be good, and they're going to have some good content, but it's just, not every issue is the state of the industry issue. Not every issue is the RIA show issue that has awards in it or whatever it may be.
Right.
So it just is learning that sometimes done is better than perfect if you can get your message across. Not everything has to be a slam dunk. And so that is what I have had to teach myself. And I've kind of tried to lead my team in that as well, because the world moves so fast now and we have to put out so much content so quickly that we obviously have really high standards and also like ethical lines and making sure that things are read by the appropriate people, especially if it's technical and it needs vetting or whatever that may be. So we have really high standards, but we also just at some point, like, okay,
Yeah.
we're there.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay now. So yeah, learning the so maybe it goes along with that no, the learning how to say no and learning to let things be okay and not be perfect in my eyes, because from the outside it probably looks great to
Probably
everybody
that's great.
else. It
Yeah.
probably does. We all have very high standards.
Yeah.
So not letting myself get stuck in the weeds. That was also something I learned early with my MBA group is because I'm a creative thinker, so I in my MBA little like cohort group, there's 5 of us, including myself. So I'm the creative one, and then I have an accountant, an engineer,
Oh,
a
wow.
supply chain and purchaser in the auto industry, and like a lean manufacturing
Oh,
instructor. And
wow.
there's me.
Wow.
Guess who's the odd one out in the group in every single freaking conversation? Holy crap. And so, yes. So, my way of thinking, I didn't realize how different my way of thinking was in business and in many situations until getting into my MBA and starting to work with this group. And the way that I approached projects and all of everything was very different. My thought processes are very different. And, but that was a good lesson for me to also, because I would kind of get into the weeds, or I would get a little well, a buy idea is a good one. I know that like I know that you guys don't think that way, but I also don't work at Ford. I don't work at the Tigers. One guy was an accountant for the Tigers at first, and now he works for the big energy company in Michigan. And you know, Johnson Controls, an international company. They all work for these massive companies. I'm over here, this little business owner by myself. Like, so I don't know. It's learning to just take it in stride, and I've learned a lot from them, and they had to learn to trust me because my thinking was so different, and I
Yep.
had to learn to trust them because their thinking was different.
Mm.
And maybe like you guys, because my experience has been pretty narrow as far as business goes, because it's been publishing and journalism, it's not often that or it's restoration. Like, I'm not in conversations with people outside of restoration very often. So I'm very thankful for the fuel that has given me.
I bet.
That really went off track from the original question, but
That's awesome. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Okay, all right. Question for you guys, because I'm just thinking, okay, going into next year, right? I just like taking at least a couple minutes to think about what's the priority going to be? What's kind of the main shift maybe that we're focused on? So for you, Chris, and then I want you to answer, Michelle, if you're willing to do so. Going into next year, what's the thing? So
Mm.
outside of just the generic business acumen, that we have to continue to iterate on and take in, what are you kind of keyed in as something pretty specific and different going into 2025?
Yeah. Well, for me, this last year, really the last few years, discipline has been such a key theme in my life, and just and yet I wish you always wish you could accomplish more or you could change more in a shorter period of time. But the reality is, I'm getting to the end of this year, and I can see certain areas of my life where I've exercised really great discipline, and some new areas where I've been able to kind of create more discipline in. And then, of course, the other thing is you start to see in stark contrast all the areas that you're very undisciplined and a total mess.
mhm,
And
mhm,
so I think for me, discipline's another key theme, in particular with my office time. Like I just talked about the creative development and stuff like that. I think I do need to work on complete versus perfect. Um, you know, I think that's a thing I need to lean into and exercise more is output
mhm.
rather than getting things exactly the way I want them. And again, a big part of that's ego I'm starting to recognize. Like for example, I submitted an article to you, Michelle, one time, and you looked at it, you're like, oh man, this is so good. I was just like, and it connected with you, this article.
Yep.
And in the back of my mind, I thought it was dog shit. And so right? Like I wasn't feeling good about it. Like, oh God, I feel like I just kind of threw this together. I wasn't feeling great about it. I was having trouble getting my ideas all clarified. And then it was good for you. Like you read it without all of that stuff. And you're like, oh, this totally connects with me. I was thinking about the same thing or processing a similar thing. So I think I need to work on that. But discipline around how I use my time between 8 and 5 is just a growing edge for me because again, I believe, and I've had moments where, um, like I found if I can just be deliberate with that, I don't need to work till 8 o'clock, you
Mhm.
know? So that's a growing edge for me. And the other thing too, for this next year is I just realized that the quality of my marriage has such a overflow effect on the rest of my life that
Yeah.
like, it's a thing that I've invested pretty heavily in the last couple of years, but I realize that there's certain things that I'm unsatisfied with, and I know my wife is too. Like there's just certain aspects of our relationship. We married 20, it'll be 23 years in March, that I'm unhappy with. And I think our tendency is, especially as we get older, is just to suppress, just to kind of push those things down or dismiss those things that aren't quite working. And just be like, well, it's good enough, or meh, at some point we'll figure that out. And I'm just realizing that if I can invest in the difficult conversations and that kind of stuff, it always has this positive downstream effect in the other areas of my life. And when I'm ignoring or not dealing with certain aspects of my marriage relationship with my wife and she's not with me and all the things, it also has a downstream effect on the other areas and relationships in my life. And so those are the two things I'm kind of keyed in on outside of just professional skill development and whatever. Um, because I think they have the most kind of far reaching impact on the other areas.
Yeah, they're exponential. What about you?
I I think that discipline comment is interesting because I do think that we go through phases in life where the discipline's really good, especially in some areas. And then we go through other phases of life where it just isn't quite there. And I don't know why that is. Sometimes I think it's like God nudging me to focus on something else. Like I've been, really disciplined in this and we can't be disciplined in everything, right? So where are our priorities? Priorities are constantly shifting. Even if it is within our families, like you were just saying, Chris, if you're focusing on your marriage specifically or a specific area of your marriage, even if you get more specific, discipline is something really interesting. And the more that I have learned to give myself grace to be human, the better I feel like I've been able to
Mm.
meet those problems and find the right discipline, which just seems counterintuitive. But I think all three of us are probably people that are pretty hard on ourselves and have pretty high standards for ourselves. And the more I allow myself to say, it's okay that you didn't kill it today because you still tried and you're still going to get it done and it's still going to be okay. And work is still going to be there tomorrow or whatever that may be. Okay, so to actually answer your question, so I try to pick a word every year that I feel like God has put on my heart, and it's like that's what my word is going to be for the year. So a couple years ago, the word that God had given me was abundance. That was for 2023, and that word really played out in everything because I didn't mean it even in financial sense. I meant it abundance in relationships, abundance in love and connection with my family, and abundance of opportunities. And it did pan out in probably every aspect of the word.
That's huge.
And yeah. And so then this year, going into it without knowing what the year held, intentionality was
Yeah.
the word. And this year took every ounce of intentionality that I had. This was like, if I'm going to be really honest, like this was not a great year. It was actually a very, very difficult year in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
like personal, professional. It was just a very difficult year. And so, but that played out, the intentionality played out, and the goals, especially in business, I guess, that we had made, which has to do with systems and processes. I know that the three of us have talked about that. That is how we're ending the year. We did get there, which is so interesting. Like those words were put on my heart before I knew what the year was going to turn out to be, and that is exactly what I needed for the year. Um, looking ahead to 2025, I haven't totally landed on my word yet, but it's somewhere in the realm of peace, joy, somewhere in there. Kind of going out of this year with more open hands, letting things go a little bit more in an intentional way, and just knowing that the business is going to continue to grow and that I don't have to go through it like this, worried that it's going to go away tomorrow, because it's not, and it's going to be okay. And so trusting myself, trusting the team, leaning more into my family, and being more intentional with those work hours like we've talked about. So somewhere in that realm. I'm looking forward to being done with my MBA. Had I known the year that I was going to have, adding an MBA in there was not a good idea. We're building a house. That was also probably not a good idea. What, plus two small children, I don't really make good life choices, is what it's come down to. So I am very
Get a
much,
puppy, Michelle. Don't
Oh
go
my
out and buy
gosh.
a puppy. That's all I can say.
oh my gosh, absolutely not. So I don't make great life choices. So in 2025, I am striving for something that is less wrecking on my entire nervous system. How about that?
Yeah, that's smart.
Boy.
You know, I think one of the things that I found myself leaning into towards the end of this year, and I don't even say it was leaning into, it was actually probably being pulled out of me. Um, and that is I just have to do, there's the language. I want to be a better equipping leader. I have you made a comment earlier about casting clarity around where we're going and what we're doing. And the reality of it is when you said that out loud, it was kind of a gut check for me because I actually don't fully agree with you. I think this year I was way more reactionary than I wanted to
Mm,
be inside the business. And
mhm,
part of that, for people that don't know, I still carry my own client book, and in fact it's a pretty robust client book, and so it's not for the weak, and that takes up a substantial part of my life, professional life.
mhm.
And yet I have aspirations not only to scale Floodlight at the pace that we're intending to, but we also again have other opportunities that from our entrepreneurial DNA make a lot of sense, and we're very interested and exciting to see what we can do. All that to be said, I think that in order for me to earn the ability and the right to fill the kind of role that I want to fill, I'm going to have to get way more intentional moving into next year about being able to cast vision and remind people why we're doing the things that we're doing and why it's so important to hold the line on the things that we've committed to. And it's been a calling this year. And again, Wayne and several other team members and people in our sphere have been good about nudging and reminding me because I teach people this for a living. And then I've just really struggled this year to keep my head clear enough to be doing that on a consistent basis. And so I got some work to do over Christmas break to just kind of prepare on how I'm going to go into next year more disciplined there and thinking through that. So I think for me is just this kind of concept of visionary. And it doesn't mean having all these brilliant ideas or so creative and having strategies all dialed in and figured out, because I'm surrounded by really smart people and they have really smart concepts and ideas that they would like to deploy. And I think a lot of them, if I take them seriously, they are the wins, they are the how. I just have to do a better job of breathing fire into what we're doing and why we're doing it. And so
Yep.
I just need to work on that visioneering. How can I be more visionary as a leader? How can I be more consistent in pointing to the why, and really leaning into the team and the people around me to go ahead and feel free to develop the how. And so that would be freeing. It would be really powerful, and I think it's what I'm naturally equipped to do. I just can struggle because tasks create value. And so it's like when I'm doing the thing or perceived, right? In my mind,
Yes.
it's easier to attach Roy
Yes.
to consulting book, to this tasking, this process, this responsibility. And the reality of it is every single time I get gut checked or have one of those moments where I go, oh God, that doesn't feel very good, it's because I wasn't casting vision. I was tasking. I was delivering service.
Yep.
And so it's like this stupid play that as owners we can get caught up in. And And so next year for me is I'd really want to lean into being the visionary leader to the team and not allowing tasks or distractions to pull me out of that. I don't know how I'm going to get there, but we'll figure it out. It'll be a long year, I'm sure.
You just helped me clarify actually my kind of my direction for next year, because I think when I talk about discipline during the day, I realize that my natural wiring is um, I don't inherently have a detail orientation, and I don't tend to be process driven. Any amount of process compliance that I have is very intentional. But what I'm realizing as we grow, what's being demanded of me as is we scale and we pursue some of these bigger opportunities is, if I'm not disciplined enough in sort of how reliable I am on certain systems and processes with the team, I become a I become a barrier and a stumbling block for the rest of the team. You know, and so when I talk about discipline, like during the day hours, for me, I think that's the next hurdle. Is I need to develop systems for myself that allow me to not get in the way and potentially hold back the team.
It's good, dude.
You know, because it's easy, and I think all of us as owners and business people contend with this at some point, right? It's like I have certain things that I'll never be rad at, and the temptation sometimes is to just toss those things over your shoulder. Just be like, you know what? I'm awesome at this. I'm just going to focus on this, and I'm just everything else can just kind of like fall off the plate. And for a number of years that kind of worked for me, and we're getting now to the stage where it's like that's getting in the way, and from time to time it's frustrating other people on the team that in some cases they have to play cleanup for Nordyke. And not only is it not fair, but it gets in the way of the growth,
Yeah.
you know, and the maturing that we're trying to do in the business. And so for me, it's going to be it just has to be about a baseline level of systems and discipline and process adherence that I bring myself to, so that I don't become a something or a bottleneck, right?
For the org. Yeah.
Yep.
Something that has significantly helped me really quick, and we've been going for a while, but anyway, this might help other people that are listening. I front load my weeks. I have found that I get very overwhelmed if I have a lot of calls later in the week, to the point that it almost throttles my ability to be effective early in the week, because I look at heavy days later in the week and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to get through 3 full days of work before having marathon calls for 6 hours on Thursday, or a bunch of podcast recordings, which I think all of us can attest to. They take a different level of brain power than a regular phone conversation. Podcasting is really fun, but engaging in conversations like this it's just different.
Yeah.
So I front load my week pretty heavily. My Mondays are stacked. Like I have back-to-back meetings all of Monday, but then I know once I get through Monday, that feels like a huge win for me, because I know that it's like our team meetings are on Monday. If I have individual meetings with any of my team, for the most part, it's Monday, but then we're setting those expectations really early in the week. We're able to carry those through. I know what everybody's up to. We go through, is anybody stuck on anything? Where's everybody at?
Yeah.
And that has helped me significantly
Yeah.
in my ability to be effective and be disciplined the rest of the week, knowing once I get through those hard days at the beginning of the week, I can block out times maybe for recordings or projects or other things that I know I need to get done, and not feel guilty later in the week for having like grayed out my schedule in that area for Michelle to do Michelle work.
Yeah.
Because I know that I've done other things and met other people where they're at, and I am protective of my schedule now. I've learned, because how many times do people email you back? No, that doesn't work for me. Can we do a different day? Well, I used to be the type that would bow to
Start moving.
everyone's schedule.
Yes. Yeah.
I will work around you. Even if it kills me, I will work around you. No, you don't. Nobody needs to be that way. Like, it is okay to say, well, how about next week at 10 a.m. on whatever day? The three of us kind of went through that with trying to schedule a few things recently, because we're all so busy, and it's okay.
Yeah. No,
Right.
I
So
agree. That's smart. I think you're right. I think too, it's the even if you start slotting things in later in the week, like you just go in with more confidence because you just
yes,
crushed Monday through Wednesday or whatever. So you're like,
100%.
hey, Friday got full. You know what? We did 3 days of this already. Let's
Yep.
pound out another one and
Yep.
call it. So
Yeah.
smart. Well, that
Yep.
was
Well, here we are. That was 2024.
yeah.
No big deal.
I can't believe it. I can't believe it, kids. It's over.
Yeah.
It's over, and I'm totally okay with it.
Me too.
Time to
I think
put
we need to make this
2020.
an annual tradition though, because I want to check in this time next year with you guys and see where you're at and
Yeah,
how
did we?
things went.
For
And
sure.
Yeah, I love it. Let's do it. I think that would be super fun. And you know what? On a side note, we do need to think through having some fun this year coming up in 2025. Some stuff we can do together. So we certainly need to
Yeah.
get that on the calendar. But I like the year in review tradition. We should do that. That would be
Yeah.
fun. I like
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
because we kind of did one last year too.
we did. Yeah, we
Yeah.
did. Yeah. And I think podcasts like this honestly are probably more relatable than a lot of the businessy stuff that both of us put out. No offense to you guys or to myself, I suppose. But
Yeah.
yeah.
I think
Hey, stay tuned for C&R's top articles because there's at least one Floodlight article that's in the top most read for the year.
Oh, really?
Whoa, hot dog.
That's fun. Cool. That's always
Right. I haven't done all the lists yet, but I was working on them last week and I'm going to finish them up today. So stay tuned.
Ooh, right
Nice.
on. That's fun.
When are
Okay.
we putting this out? Did we decide we'll do this over like Christmas week? Is that the
This podcast?
yeah? Well,
Sure.
maybe I'll talk to the crew. Maybe that's when we'll throw this one out, and then somebody can start their day with us on Christmas morning when they're with their
Of
family.
course.
Just turn us on and have it in the back. No, I'm kidding.
That's
All right,
perfect.
that's when we'll put it out.
Yep.
The balance and discipline is working out really well for
Yeah, exactly.
listeners.
Way to turn it off, guys.
Huh?
Hey,
Okay.
what a rad year. Thanks for hanging out with us all year, Michelle. It's we value our friendship to you. It's been
Me
good.
too.
I think we've at times been the person creating a little emotion in your life, and at times we've maybe been support.
Positive and
in
negative
that.
emotions.
Yeah,
Yin and
that's
yang,
right.
I'm sure.
It's the yin and yang. So.
I feel like you guys have PTSD from like several years ago that you're
Oh.
never going to get over.
No, I
No,
It's
no.
don't get a
fine.
nervous
No.
tick about it. It's pretty amazing.
Oh, sometimes I pick up my phone to text Brandon and I'm like, stop it, Chris.
Insight,
gosh.
it's amazing.
Yeah.
Well,
Oh,
love you, friend. Thanks for
Yeah.
a bad year. We'll see you in 2025.
yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
See you.
See ya.